I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be more fruitful than it was before. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Now remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain within the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, and I in you, you will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like the branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. But if you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples.
Some of you know this about me, but I am, or was, I should say this truly, I used to be a lazy gardener. And I say that with no ego. I was a very lazy gardener. I had grand plans for my garden. I would have this image of this delightful harvest that I would have of tomatoes, peppers, strawberries, and I would eagerly go through Cedar's garden store in the spring and pick up all these plants because I had these grand plans, and then I would plant them, and for a few weeks I would tend them. I would weed, I would water, I would sometimes prune a bit, and I would take care of my little babies, and then life got busy. And I thought, I'll get to it tomorrow. Yeah, I'll get to it next week. Yeah, they'll be fine. They're growing well. They're doing good. There's plenty of rain coming. They're getting plenty of light. But they would start to really, they would grow, which was a good thing. But they would grow wild and kind of get out of control. And if you know anything about kind of gardening, and this is something that took me a while to learn, is that, well, it seemed like a good thing. Like they're growing, they're getting bigger, and that's a good thing, right? Plants are meant to grow. But it was a good thing until the blight began to appear on the tomato plants. And my strawberries would spread, but there would be no fruit. And it would just soon get out of control, and it would get to the point where I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to get this back under control. And so my dream of a beautiful garden would slowly die. And I would still get fruit. I would still get, tomatoes and some peppers, but it wasn't what it could be. And I think looking back, John was always, my husband was always trying to kind of coach me through this of like, buy less, do less. You're going to have a better harvest if you just keep it within your scope of attention, of what you're able to tend to. Because, to be honest, I could have prevented much of what went wrong if I had simply paid attention and tended to the garden the way it needed to be. To prune, to cut off those wild sprouts, those daughters that seem to want to go everywhere. And, the idea is, yes, plants should grow, but when we want to have a harvest, we need to nurture them in a certain way. We need to tend to them and take care of them. And, allowing the plants to often grow and to prune them is about preventing things like disease or insects, and to stay focused, to allow that plant to go in the way that you want it to go, to direct its energy in the places that you want it to go, because all that growth looked good, but it wasn't producing fruit. That when you prune something, when you direct a plant, you're often telling it where it needs to direct its energy. And kind of thinking about that and how I really wanted to harvest more than I just wanted a whole bunch of leaves to look at. And I think about my lazy gardening, in particular when I was reading this passage this week that comes to us from John 15. And this is about gardening in some ways. You know, it's about a vine and a gardener. And it seems fitting that we are talking about this as we have been talking throughout these last few weeks about what it is to tend to our souls, what it is to kind of nurture our souls in a way that hopefully grows our faith and produces fruit. So how we have been exploring this is through the nurture of spiritual practices. You know, looking at these, and in some ways maybe as a gardener would tend to a garden, tending to those plants, giving them water and attention and nourishment, as well as removing threats to that plant and its growth and its potential for growth, even if sometimes that threat comes from the plant itself. You know, one of the ways that you get rid of blight is to keep the leaves off the ground, which means you have to start to get rid of those branches that want to sprout off close to the ground. And that in itself helps that plant grow well and also prevents that disease that kind of tears up at that plant. And the thing is, when we look at this passage, this image that Jesus gives us of a vine and branches and a gardener, that it's a process that he's describing that we ourselves are invited into with God. And I think how fitting is that we're going to take a look at that today. And so we need to understand a little bit about vines. Some of you are way more skilled gardeners than I am. You know who you are. You have beautiful, beautiful, lovely harvests every year that I admire. But if you know anything about vines, they can grow wild, but in the Bible, they are often a cultivated plant. They're something that people would nurture, that they would tend to, and not just simply, hey, go pick out some wild berries here or there. No, these would be plants that they would tend to, that they would take time with. And the thing about vines is that they are fast growing, that they need a wise hand to prune them, to know what to pinch off or what to keep on the vine, how to shape that plant and ensure that it bears fruit. You see, when that vine, much like my gardening experience, when it's untended, it will tend to spread out and it will grow leaves galore, and much like this image behind me, which looks lovely. You know, this is something beautiful to look at, but it gets big and unruly in a way, and it doesn't really nourish fruit or encourage fruit because it's going to continue to propagate those leaves. And it can get pretty out of control. And if you look at this, like you see a lot of leaves, but do you see any fruit? There's no fruit here. And that's the whole point, isn't it? Is to have fruit that nourishes. And that's why a gardener will prune. Now, obviously, these are some modern techniques, but they're based in what we've known for centuries and centuries, is to tend to that plant, to cut off what is not helpful. And so allowing that time to cut it in order that it can focus where it needs to focus. And it's not continuing to spread, but encouraged to produce fruit. And so in doing this, it also produces a little bit of structure. And I don't know about you, but sometimes structure is very needed, but sometimes hard to come by. So the pruning, is for the benefit of the whole plant and the branches. And it allows for strength and kind of focused effort. It's preventative and removing what isn't required for production or growth. And I think about this and this image that Jesus gives us and what it is that he's talking about and himself as that key vine. And I kind of want to, like, the idea of pruning, like, I don't like the idea of cutting. You know, I was always hesitant when somebody was coaching me in my own gardening, like, really, where do I cut? What do I cut? Like, really, do I need to cut? Like, that doesn't seem like a good thing. One, because it seems very, like, like, that's done. Like, what if I wreck it? But if you think about a gardener, and this image, the gardener is God. And he is pruning wisely. And we often want to shy away from that. Like, you know, like our faith is like a vine, and we're attached to Jesus as branches, but the gardener's coming along and pruning, and oh, am I going to get pruned off? Well, we're told in that passage right away that we're already, and the term is clean, meaning we're good, because we've already entered into that relationship with the vine. We're already connected in. We're a good branch. But there may be things on us that are distracting us from what we're really supposed to be doing. And that may be where the pruning comes in. So I get that we're sometimes wanting to shy away from pruning, the idea of being cut off, and that's not really what Jesus is getting at here when he's describing this. He's talking more about, we're already in there. We're already on the vine. How will we stay on the vine ourselves? Because we've already decided to follow Jesus. And that connects us into that vine. But more, what is in our life that is a distraction? That may look good, like those leaves, but really isn't doing anything for us. Is a distraction, is noise. That may need some pruning. That is, our lives are sometimes too full, right? We got too much going on, too much busyness, and that robs us of the ability to produce fruit. And so if we think about God as this attentive gardener, and the beautiful thing is that a gardener is never closer to the plant than when he is pruning it. So this is an intimate act. This is a close, familiar act. This is a gardener paying attention to what does this branch need from me in order to produce fruit. And it's a beautiful thing when it's done well. And a harvest can be enjoyed by so many people. And we often forget that. We think about our faith, and we have this idea of being fruitful in our faith. But the thing is, if we're a plant producing fruit, our fruit is for others to enjoy. Our fruit is to nourish others and also enable this plant, that is us, to spread and nourish new plants and new fruit. But really at the heart of this passage, this idea of this vine, is the idea that Jesus is that vine and being connected in that vine. And our passage today uses the word remain. And remain is a good word for it, but sometimes we hear in this translation the word abide, which is an older word. The idea of abiding is, actually I want to go to this in a moment, but this idea of abiding, of dwelling, of remaining, of staying in, living in, continuing. So this is idea of connection, being connected into the vine that is Jesus, and having that connection be so intimate and so strong, to live in it. And I think we kind of lose sight of that because we're not sure what that really